Well, welcome to the Discipleship for the Decades podcast. I am Jeremy, joined by
Karis Kemp, and also joined by fellow staffer here at Bethel Presbyterian Church, David Campbell, who is our facilities manager. And we are excited to this is a familiar crew. It's going to be a fun time of discussion.
David's probably somebody that a lot of you have never met unless you come in during the week. But I can promise you are really glad that he's here with some of the stuff that, what's your weekly, what are some things you do during the week around here?
That nobody knows about.
Oh, well, if it's clean, then either myself or Ann did that. Somebody else you wouldn't know. But also a lot of maintenance stuff that you don't know the lights went out, but they did, and now they're back on. So it's things like that. So
getting the bus taken to get an inspection done.
During COVID, spraying down rooms.
Oh, yeah. There's a ton of disinfectant going on around here. So, I should be disinfected now. So
if you come around here and there feels like there's a film on a table, it's probably just disinfectant. Don't mind it.
That's right. It's good for you.
That's right.
It is. So David is one of our first guests as we make this transition to a new kind of model podcast. But we've got you on today because you're involved with two kind of groups, one of which is Exchange Club out of Mooresville, and then Watchmen of the Streets, Heath Burchett, who is actually going to be our next week's guest. So give us a little bit of the Exchange Club to start with.
So Exchange Club, I was in a pretty bad spot in my life, and I was just looking for something to do. That I was going to church. I was getting something out of church, but I just wasn't applying it through the week, I think. And so I was looking for something to get me out of this rut that I was in. And so I was looking, and I came across a friend of mine, actually, Paul Somerville, told me about Exchange, and so it just blew me away. Exchange, we have 3 programs of service. We take care of youth, community service, and Americanism, which is, if any of you know Field of Flags in Mooresville, that'll be huge. That's our biggest fundraiser of the year. And then our national project is the prevention of child abuse. So all of these things together, it's just there's so many places that you can go to give back. And I think that's where I was missing the point was serving others. And we've talked a lot about that here. And so it's been a good ride. And so in 4 years, it'll be 4 years in December that I've been with Exchange. And a year from now, or a year from July, I will actually be president of this club in Mooresville. So that'll be a new step that will be taken. So
can I pick on the rut for a second? Because what I'm understanding is that you were feeding your soul, right? You were going to church, getting that, and the rut partly came, as I'm understanding, from not having where's my practice in this? Like, what's my outpouring?
It was, and it was a little deeper than that, and we don't have time to get into all of that, but I was at the end of a job, 29 years of a job, or nearly at that time, and so with that, and things were really going downhill, with this job, and so it was more or less go to work, probably grab something to drink on the way home, eat supper, drink, and go to bed to do it all over again tomorrow. And church on Sunday was great. Monday through Friday was terrible. Okay. So it was just crumbling out from under me. And so instead of calling the pastor or calling some support out of the church, I just took it upon myself at that point and was going the wrong direction.
Yep.
And so, so I found something that went along the lines with the church, and that's what Exchange has been for me. And it really has put me in a different place. It's been good.
Which is interesting if you think about just the theological nuance of that, of we were created for work. Like there's something in us that needs to live into what we're called to do or have a purpose.
Right.
Mm-hmm. And so when that's taken away, or maybe it shifts to figure out, okay, where does my identity lie? And sometimes it is in finding that purpose. And so thanks for just sharing a little bit about that.
I was just becoming a hermit. I mean, on the weekend, except for going to church the whole weekend, I was staying home. I mean, I wouldn't look outside, much less leave the house.
Yeah.
And so it was really a bad time. And I needed something to pull me up out of that. And so, with a lot of prayer and I found Exchange. It's been really good.
Well, it's interesting because, Bethel's mission statement starts with serving people. You said serving others. But yeah, right. I mean, like that's what it's about. And the even more interesting thing to me is you found a non-Christian, non-religious way to a group to plug into based off of what you were being fed on Sundays.
That's exactly right. We don't consider ourselves a Christian group, but we pray for everybody, just so if anybody's wondering. So, but that's our club. I can't say that other towns or cities are doing the same. I think they probably are, but I don't know that.
Yeah.
There's a subtle faith component still underneath it.
Absolutely. Yep. I think most everybody in Exchange, we call each other brothers and sisters, just like we do in the church. I mean, this has been as uplifting. It really has been as uplifting for me as the church. So I think it's getting out and finding a practical use to what God has told us to do. And our mission statement at Grace is loving God, serving others. So it's really the same as it is here. So, and that's what we're supposed to be doing.
Mm-hmm. Oh, absolutely. Well, and then you are also plugged into Watchmen of the Streets a little bit too, or started, right?
So, and I sort of believe that's why God brought me here, was because one of my jobs here, and I didn't mention this before, and this is one I sort of took on myself, is sort of the security for the little ones up there in the preschool.
Yeah.
So I always have my eyes out and watching what's going on up there. And one day there was a guy in the lobby. And I walked past him, and I've got my eyes on him, but I walked past him again. The third time I walked past him, and I wasn't going far, but the third time I walked past him, I finally just said, "Hey, man, is there something I can help you with, all right? Because I don't know who this guy is, and now he's starting to worry me." Okay. Uh-huh. And well, it was Heath. It was Heath Burchett of Watchmen, and it wasn't 5 minutes that we started talking, and it's just flooring me what he's got going on and how the parallels that we could find in Exchange. And so I took this information he gave me to Exchange, and I don't know, it took about a year to get that rolling, but now Exchange and Watchmen are just pretty much married up in Mooresville. And so it's been a real good thing. In fact, just this past Saturday, we had a donation drive, and it just blew me away. But what my friends in Exchange and friends in the community just brought and just dumped stuff on me.
Was it for Watchmen in particular?
For Watchmen. Yeah. Okay. So that's one of the things Exchange does, is whether it's Watchmen or Soup Kitchen, was now Feed NC.
Yep.
We will do donation drives and just see if we can reach out and get people to come in and to help us help them. And so it was a fun time meeting people, seeing people, and just a ton of stuff for Mooresville.
Well, and join us next week for a deeper dive into Watchmen, but just a high level view to give a little bit of understanding to who Watchmen is and what they do.
And again, next week when you get Heath here, he'll tell you about Charlotte. Charlotte's a much bigger spot than what I'm doing here. But I have a couple of guys in Mooresville, and there's a few people that come and straggle through, but we actually go in the woods. And so a lot of people will go to the shelters and drop off clothes or something like that. We actually go to the camp, and it's really it'll break your heart to track back into the woods to find a camp, especially what's in Charlotte.
Yeah.
Mooresville, I've got some trails that will maybe only lead to one or two people.
Yeah.
There we did some trails that led to 30 or 40. You know, it's huge. And so but we go right there. We carry backpacks in with food and hygiene things, and if whatever they need. I mean, you don't realize what you need until you don't have it, and they don't have it. And now I've gotten a good friend. His name's Ronnie. That's in Mooresville. He came from Charlotte. And he's become my friend, and he's in the woods today, but he knows that he can call me, and I'll be right there for him. And so, and to be honest with you, if I needed some prayer or something, I could call him for that too. So he's actually done that and turned it right around on us. We wanted to pray for him, and he said, "Let me pray for y'all." And so that was a pretty amazing minute there for that. You know, it felt pretty good too.
So when you say the woods in Mooresville, obviously, you know, our listeners may or may not be familiar with what's the homeless situation going on here in Mooresville. So it sounds like there are people who camp out in woods who don't have a home. That becomes their home.
Right.
And how do they survive? How do they sustain themselves?
Well, you know, and I'm sure you've seen the tent camps on you know, on TV. Well, it's like that. Ronnie's got a pretty cool little spot. I mean, and he knows it. You know, he's back in the woods by himself. I wouldn't like that myself. You know, I don't want to be alone in the woods by myself. But he does fine. And but yeah, when these storms have been rolling through and trees are falling all around him, you know, he just has to stay as safe as he can. But now again, in Mooresville, you may have more homeless than I realize because they're not all out in the woods. Right. They may be in a car or a van or sleeping on somebody's couch, and that's a big problem too. But I can't find them. You know, they're not out for me to find.
Yep. Well, and one of our discipleship questions being, who are you sharing the love of God with, right? I assume that the answer to that is Ronnie, but again, it's based off of like your spiritual journey, what you're hearing on Sunday mornings, being able to live that out with him.
Right. And, you know, and it's real good to go talk to him because he watches church on his phone. I mean, he goes and he goes and fills up his batteries. He's got some batteries that he carries back to his tent. He charges them up, and so he'll watch Sunday morning services. And so we actually can talk back and forth about that, and really about anything. And but yeah, it's just feeling the love. I mean, we're supposed to love, and he can feel that. You know, when he sees me coming up in the woods, he knows that it's love, that someone's doing that for them. And when the gang that Heath will talk about, this gang, now they can bring a whole bunch of love because it's a big troop, you know. So it's pretty neat. But yeah, that's, you know, and I could easily say, you know, I've got 4 kids and now 6 grandkids. I could easily say that I'm sharing there too, but I think they probably share more with me now than I do that with them.
Yeah.
So,
well, and thinking about like just your relationship with Ronnie, what's it like to be discipling, to love on like his group's loving on a ton of people.
Right.
You've kind of made it like, hey, Mooresville, it's lower amounts of people. I'm just gonna love on 1 or 2.
I think there's something to be said about both. Because Heath and the gang, they reach out to so many people, and I'm not reaching that many people, but the depth that I think that I can reach and become, we're friends now. I mean, I really say, and I say this a lot, that our friends out in the woods, or you know, our friends out in the street, I can say that with truthfulness because he really is my true, honest to God friend. I mean, he really is, and it just makes me. You know, I've seen him interviewed for the news in Charlotte, and they interviewed
Heath or Ronnie?
Ronnie.
Okay.
So he's been interviewed several times for different news organizations in Charlotte, and when I sit back and I watch that, and it'll make you'll tear up sometimes just to hear some of the stories that he has of why he's out there and what happened to him. He had his own business in Louisiana, and he was living the good life, the comfortable life, and I think it was Katrina hit. I believe it was Katrina, it wiped his home out. It wiped his business out. He had nothing left, and he wasn't able to recover from that. Yeah. And so I think that's where all this started. And once you get to that spot, it's hard to get out of that spot. Mm-hmm. So he's been there for a long time.
And I think one of the gifts that you're bringing is just the social need that everybody has to know and be known, to have a relationship where there's caring, give and take, that everybody needs that, right? And we can all speak to that human need, but also that there's a level of transformative care that happens when you do know somebody's story versus, okay, I'm going to go do a mass project for a lot of people who I'll get to know an inch deep versus, okay, no, we're taking this a mile deep. And now because I know your story and you know mine, there is friendship there. Right. And now when there's something you need as your friend, it's a whole different level of what you can do for him and what he could do for you too.
Right. I go out every other Saturday, and I chose to go mornings. Heath goes at night, and I just don't like going out in the dark and down these trails. You break an ankle or something, and so I do Saturday mornings. And so Thursday or Friday before I go out, I'll just text Ronnie and ask him if he's needing anything special. If there's anything I can bring him that he needs. And we've gotten to a point now where I know what he likes, I know what he needs, and but it's just now what he out of, and but typically it's just none of that. Just stop and see me. So I usually take him a little care package, a little bag of something, and just go hang out with him for 20 or 30 minutes, or sometimes it's an hour. If we, and he plays a guitar, he may sit down and play you a tune or two, and so it's a neat time.
Yeah, that's interesting to me how much when we're in situations like that, you talk about how much you get back, right? As much as what you're giving to him.
Oh yeah. Sometimes when I'm leaving out of those woods. And because, it's easy to say when we're at home and something broke and I'm just mad at the world or whatever, and maybe it just happens to me. I don't know. But and you just think, well, this could be better, right? Well, you could be in the woods, in this tent. There was a moment when we got him like a 10-man tent, okay? In fact, I think I picked it up right here at Bethel. I believe somebody dropped that off, and I took that tent to him. And we put that tent up, and man, if you could see the love in this guy's eyes when he got something that he could actually stand up in and change his clothes rather than being on his knees in this little tiny thing that we typically give out, and that's all we can. We can't give a $200 tent out, you know? Mm-hmm. And so, but he had this huge tent, and it just lit him up. Now he's back in a small tent at the moment because the raccoons and some tree limbs and things will just tear a tent up eventually. So, but anyway, just for that moment to see how bright he looked for that time, it was special. So,
I have a question around this. Obviously, you step into a situation where it feels like this is not your most abundant life. Like it's a hardship that you're living. How much do you feel like you need to fix? And is that even an agenda anymore now that you have become his friend?
Well, I think I get this. Men usually are just fixers. We want to fix everything that we come in contact with. And I would love to be able to fix this whole problem. Sure. And it's certainly not as simple as that. And even fixing Ronnie's problem, I'd love to be able to go give him enough money to get out of the situation he's in, but I don't have it. Most people don't.
Yep.
And but to see him on a daily basis, and just to see him smile, to see him cry about the same thing that he just smiled about, that's where it really gets to you. He starts telling a story about how good it was to see Heath a few weeks ago, because they were buddies like me and Ronnie are now, but they're separated now. Heath's in Charlotte and Ronnie's in Mooresville, and so he starts talking about Heath and all the things that they used to run around together, and had some fun. And as the smile starts to go away and you see a tear, that's hard, but that's my buddy, so we get along real good, and I'm thankful to be able to help him. One of the things that at the end of every service at Grace, Farrell says, "You're blessed to be a blessing." And sometimes we don't feel blessed, but we are. And when you go out there and you see what's going on out there, it really does make you feel that you're blessed. So,
well, and for Ronnie too, I think there's a sense, at least in what you've shared, he has that same weight of he's blessed to be a blessing. And
right.
So his blessing you when you come, that's humanity. That's being made in God's image, that you are created to bless. And
right.
we can hoard it, we can deny it, but there's something innate in us that needs to live into that blessing, that give and take, and that receiving. And so I love that I hear it's not just one-sided, nor should it be, because
right.
all God's children need to live into that calling, whatever state we find ourselves in, right?
Right.
Well, but we also have to be open to receiving that blessing,
yeah.
right? Like the two-way street, like you could just as easily build a wall
yep.
and go, no. Like, I don't need his blessing, right? Like people go that route sometimes, and we have to have an open heart and go, hey, no. What can I find in this situation? How can I let God, I really think it's right, God speaking to us through these people.
Right.
And so having that open heart's not easy for everyone, but I think if we can get there, the blessing is just huge.
Perhaps part of the not open heart is you probably, as one who's coming to serve, don't always expect that that's what you're going to receive when you step in.
Right.
And that's a humbling thing to go, oh, here I was thinking I was imparting and I'm receiving.
Right.
And I think that's God's beautiful sense of humor as we step into any kind of ministry, be it with somebody who is experiencing homelessness or somebody who's experiencing cancer.
Oh, yeah. 3 years ago, I would have gone kicking and screaming to do any of this. That's, I was at a place where I'm a terrible introvert, okay? And all of this has gotten me to come out of that some. I don't think you ever get rid of it because I'm still scared to death even right now. But you're able to get past it. And so all of these things, Exchange, Watchmen, even Bethel, the kids here at Bethel have helped me get through some of that. So, I probably would have even said no to God. God said, okay, we're going to do this. And one way or another, I'm going to get you to do this. And so I think that's where Exchange and then Bethel and then Watchmen. And I think that's how it's all come together.
So if you were to give a parting thought to folks about stepping in or taking that bold step. We asked you to boldly go where no David has gone before on this podcast, but what's that bold step that you would encourage?
Well, first of all, I would think that if you feel that God's nudging you, don't. First of all, if He's nudging you, He's going to empower you to make it happen. He's not going to let you go fall on your face, right? Yep. And I believe that. And if I do fall on my face, it was probably something He wasn't nudging. It was probably something I wanted, right? And so that's what I think. If there's usually something that confirms that nudge, and so if you get that nudge, then pay attention because there's usually confirmation that comes behind that. And it was for me. I mean, there was something telling me there's something else out here, and then then I get this weird guy in the lobby, and it's Heath, right? Yep. And so there, and we've hit it off. We're like brothers now, and so it's one of those things where you just you keep your eyes open and don't ever say no to God. That would be my big statement, I think.
When our time goes so quickly, we're at the end now. It's just so great to, and we'll see this over and over again, but our discipleship journey is a journey, right? 10 years ago, it was completely different. Now it's, right, God's got you in a different spot, and I just think it's so cool to see how that ebbs and flows. And so it's been great to talk to you, David.
Well, thanks.
Thanks for joining us. Yeah, it is sort of like pulling teeth to get David to come on here.
You'd do it again, wouldn't you, David?
Yeah.
Well, yeah, I might.
See, we got him. But yeah, no, thanks for all that you do around here at Bethel and for what you're doing out in the homeless community and with Exchange. So it's been a great episode. Be ready to join us next week. We'll dive a little bit deeper into some of this.
Good deal.
Have a good week, folks. We'll see you next time.
Thanks.